Well, hello there, everyone. Thanks for joining us here again on Topic UFO. Tonight we have a super interesting guest. I really am excited about tonight's conversation, if you will. Tonight we're going to be speaking to a gentleman by the name of Joe Taylor. And Joe is the owner and curator of the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum in Crosbyton, Texas, which is approximately 35 miles east of Lubbock, Texas, here in the United States of America. And Joe specializes, of course, in fossils, but not just your everyday ordinary fossils. He's very much into history of the past when it comes to giants. And he's got a new book out about this, and we're going to talk to him about that as well. So, as we say here on Topic UFO, without further ado, let's talk to Mr. Joe Taylor. Joe, are you out there?
I'm here.
Great. Joe, tell us about this Mount Blanco Fossil Museum. How did it come to be, and what is it about?
Well, since I'm a collector by nature as a kid and all that, I just keep things. And when I began to realize there were fossils out here in the canyon where I grew up, in Mount Blanco Canyon, or Blanco Canyon, when I moved back to Texas, I had all this stuff, and eventually, because I could sculpt and restore things for museums and individuals, I had all these fossils and casts, and I just decided to name my museum after the local fossil beds out here, which are world famous. They're called the Blanco Fossil Beds, named after Mount Blanco Peak, which is a little white peak out here that was famous with the Indians, and then apparently Coronado came through and officially named it with a Spanish name that we use, Monte Blanco, but then we've corrupted that to Mount Blanco. So since I grew up in that community, I just decided to honor my little community out there with and the type locality for the three-toed horses there. So that's how I came to call it Mount Blanco.
Yeah. And your museum houses both actual fossils as well as casts of other fossils that have been found in other places of the world. Is that correct?
That's correct, yes.
Now, so the folks out there are probably wondering why we have someone from a fossil museum on Topic UFO. Well, the reason for that is because, Joe, you have, I guess you could say, some theories, some beliefs that you feel these fossils either indicate or prove. And the one thing that you talk about a lot are these giants, these giant beings from the past, as they were described in the Bible. And we'll get into how all that relates with UFOs and ET and all that kind of stuff. But tell us about these giant bones.
Well, if you're a collector of fossils all come from the ground or out of rocks. And that's where all these human skeletons come from, ancient human skeletons. And quite a few are these skeletons of men 8, 9, 10, 12, 15 feet tall. So they're fossils too. And there's, because I am interested in anything that comes out of the ground, all the fossils, all the mammoths, dinosaurs, horses, etc., it just stood to reason that you begin to find out about all the giant men that are dug up across the world. And being a Christian a long time, I've always known about the giants, David and Goliath, the Nephilim, the fallen angels, all these things that refer to things in the ancient past. So I just began collecting information about the fossil giants, and after a while, I thought there's a lot more to this than just a big man that died here. There's something more to it. So as one would find out if they had my book, you'll see that if you start researching giants or looking into all these giant human finds, then all this other stuff comes up because there is a spiritual connection to them. There's not just they're not just big people that made big swords and things. There's some reason why they're giants, and you begin to get into the spiritual realm, and there's all sorts of theories on the spiritual realm, but it's nevertheless there. So it begins to be two things. You know, if you dig up dinosaurs, most dinosaur digger friends of mine, they don't give it any connotation. They believe in evolution, and they have some idea that stuff evolved from some lower form, but they don't think there's any spiritual thing there. In fact, there is a real spiritual reason why dinosaurs are even buried or even preserved at all, but they never see it. They never think about it. But if you get into giants, human giants, you know, it's unavoidable that eventually you're going to have to deal with the theories about how did they get here. Are they, you know, the descendants of fallen angels, aliens from another world, or why are they so big? We can't explain that in modern context. So it's inescapable after a while.
Now, and when you say big, there's a picture on your website on the homepage of a drawing of a what looks like a huge human skeleton, but then there's also a cast of a femur leg bone, human femur, that is how large? 8 feet?
The femur itself measured to be 47.5 inches long, 120 centimeters.
147 inches?
120 or 47 inches.
Oh, 47 inches. Okay, 47 inches.
That makes a man anywhere between 14 and 16 feet tall. That's
and
a person.
Now I have to ask you this, Joe. Now, I specified this was a cast or a sculpture of a bone that was supposedly dug up in Egypt.
Right.
And can you tell us about that? I mean, how did you find out about this bone that was dug up in Egypt, and how did that all come about? Was this dug up a long time ago, or?
A professor contacted me for some reason. I really don't know why, but he contacted me and said, I want to send you this article about this fellow who was a road construction engineer in Egypt, Homs, and Urianzora. And Homs and Egypt are where all these, it's in the news lately with, you know, the goings on over there. And he said this article states that there was a road construction engineer that writes into this little paper called It's About Time, talking about the various things that he uncovered, I suppose, as a building roads. And he talks about they would bulldoze these hills, which turned out to be burial mounds. And in three different places that he was talking about, there were men that were 12 feet or taller, of 12 or 15 feet tall. And he said, you know, well, they're a construction crew, right? So you got bulldozers, maintainers, and all that, and they have to continue the road. They can't just stop and dig everything up that they find. So, you know, here up comes these probably huge sarcophagi made out of limestone, and at least here's these big bones. So you get off and look at them, and they got to keep going. But he gets the tape out, measures one of the femurs, and he says it was, you know, this long, and that there were several of these guys buried in these various mounds. So this professor said, would you do me a sculpture of that? And again, I don't know how he knew I was a sculptor, but I said, I'm going to show my students how big that is. So I did a sculpture and sent him a cast of it, made a cast for myself, and thought, I want to blow up a human skeleton, draw a human skeleton that big, just see how tall this guy would be. So I projected the drawing up of a human skeleton, and it's his rib cage comes to the 9 feet 3. The bottom of his rib cage. So you can decide however you want to be, how tall he is, but he's as tall as King Og, you know, mentioned in the Bible. King Og's bed was noted to be about 14 feet long. And people say, well, he must have only been 12 feet tall. Well, that's not necessarily true. If you know something about ancient, how we used to live, you know, you go back 100 or 150 years ago, in the wintertime, people would heat up rocks, you know, at their fireplace, put them in a leather basket at the bottom of their bed, hang their feet over the edge of the bed, and keep their feet warm so they wouldn't get cold. So if a man's 6 feet tall, he might have a bed 5 feet long so he can hang his feet over the end, okay?
Gotcha.
So if a man is 16 feet tall or 15 feet tall, he might have a bed that's only 14 feet so he can hang his feet off. So at either rate, a 14-foot tall man or a 16-foot tall man, you can't explain that by saying, well, he's an acromegaly, his pituitary gland is acted up, because there were a lot of these people. King Og was a king, and he was a soldier, as were a lot of those giants over there.
So Joe, now I have heard and seen stories of where these giant bones have, I have never seen one in real life, so I'm just going to say, supposedly were dug up, giant heads, skulls. So let's just say it's true. Let's just say it's true, and these beings did live, these giants. What is the difference between them and us as human beings of the modern age? Were they human or were they something else?
Well, the Bible calls angels men. When they went to see Abraham, and oftentimes encounters with angels, they're called men. So apparently, the sons of God, were men in the sense that they weren't an animal, they weren't a stone, they weren't a bird. So men look like people. We don't look like apes. We don't look anything like an ape. So these would be humans in the sense that they're not any of those things. But were they, why would you have a man 15 or 20 feet or 30 feet tall or even taller? You can't explain that by normal, men and women get together and have a child. Even if one of them's evil, it still doesn't create an evil child or a giant child. The other thing is, almost all the histories of the big giants, I don't mean just the 6'7" or the 7 feet tall people, and there were huge races of those all over America, but the men that are 12, 15 feet tall, typically history records them as being evil, cannibals, homosexuals, Satanists, you name it. And they often had 6 toes, 6 fingers, 2 rows of teeth. Some of them had 2 rows of teeth, upper and lower. So, you can have today there are people with 2 rows of teeth, but, and 6 toes and 6 fingers sometimes, and they're just ordinary people. They won't have any, so apparently that is within the human potential. So that in itself doesn't make you a giant or make you evil, but it is a human characteristic. So that these giants, even though they may have been, their origin may be other than totally human, still the fact that they had 6 toes, 6 fingers, they're not like apes. Apes don't have that. They're just not that many anomalies among apes.
Yeah, okay, but if these giants existed on Earth at some stage of history, why are they not here now?
Well, and I'm not sure they're not here now. I just heard the other day that over in, I don't know, somewhere like Iraq or Iran or somewhere, that there were some soldiers over there that were like 12 feet tall. And I can't confirm that. I just heard it, and the source I heard it from, wasn't someone I would discount. In the Korean War, there apparently were some of these soldiers came down out of the mountains in Korea, and these guys are 8 feet tall. There's a Buddhist monk over in Nepal, India, or somewhere. I think he's still alive. He was 8 feet tall and an ordinary, he wasn't ill or an acromagaliac. So they may be around. In fact, this gets into a whole other discussion, which I've been very careful not to just jump into a conclusion. That is the return of the Nephilim, the return of the giants.
Right.
A lot of people are saying, hey, they're going to come back. And this guy was saying, I think I saw one in Israel. He appeared and then went away. So, I'm open-minded enough, I think, to consider that and just, consider the source. It was a rumor, but keep my mind open, and is there something to it,
Well, I think
there is something to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think the key when you discuss any of this stuff is to keep an open mind. I mean, because once your mind closes, you might as well not even worry about talking
go to the
about
movies
it.
and be entertained.
Right. Now, I believe you do know Dr. Judkins?
Yes.
That wrote the book Return of the Nephilim, I believe was the name of it.
Yep.
He was on. We had him on as a guest a few months back, and was kind of his premise that these giants, I guess you would call them, were coming back, and that there was some sort of connection. I can't remember exactly, but he felt that the UFOs that people are seeing nowadays, or at least some of them, are in some way connected to this return. Do you have any thoughts there? Or I'm surprised that you don't have more stronger beliefs in that. Why are you so careful when it comes to that return of the Nephilim part of it?
Well, careful in, I guess, what I say publicly, and for this reason, a lot of people, this is just so strange to them. They can't. A lot of Christian people, you start talking about UFOs, you might as well be talking about Bigfoot,
yeah,
and flying snakes. They just can't. They can't even talk about it. So I try to backpedal a little bit, and depending on how sensitive a person is to it, back off a little bit if they want to know more. But yeah, I think, like Aaron is saying, he takes a pretty strong stand. There's something going on here with the return of the Nephilim, the UFOs, all that stuff. There's a lot of explanations, but Aaron and I would be we're both professing Christians and trying to understand what the Bible says about things. So, then there's all this apparent evidence out there, and you can't just ignore it.
Yep.
And if you're a researcher like he is and myself, we're both diggers, bone diggers. We're just looking for information and things, and so you're just going to naturally perk up when someone says something that sounds strange, and we'll look into it. And then you think, oh wow, I thought that was really weird, and now I'm beginning to think maybe it's not so far-fetched after all.
So, let's talk a little bit about your new book. It just came out, right? Just recently.
Just recently.
And it's called Giants Against Evolution. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Giants Against Evolution. What does that title mean?
Well,
besides the obvious, but
yeah. My point there's more than one point of the book, but the main point is giant men are a problem for the evolutionist. And the evolutionist has done a great deal of harm, in my opinion, to the thinking of people. The whole moral climate of the world has been influenced by Darwinism and evolutionism, which, if you take it on face, like most evolutionists say, there's no room for God in it. There's no room for the Bible story, the account of Adam and Eve. There's no room for that in the evolution story. So we feel like it's done a lot of damage, and you have to address that. So what I've shown is whether you think these people, these giant men, were fathered by fallen angels, or if you think they're just big people, they just somehow grew bigger than they do now, had all these extra appendages. For the evolutionist, it's a dead-end street because he can't have them being fathered by an angel because he doesn't believe in God, doesn't believe in spirits, doesn't believe in angels or demons or anything like that. So he can't have the spiritual context. And he knows enough about paleontology and physiology that he knows that you can't have a man 14, 15 feet tall and taller with extra appendages who are soldiers and hundreds of them. You can't have that and still maintain your little monkey to 6 foot tall man story. What I'm trying to say is evolution isn't true. Here's just one other nail in the coffin. These giants disprove that. Decide however you want how they got here. That's the problem. Animals are the same thing. Look at giant animals. They're everywhere, and every year they dig up a bigger mammoth or a bigger rhino. My guy should dig up a rat or a hamster that weighed 3,000 pounds alive. I mean, that's unbelievable. The fossil record just argues against evolutionism's idea that things started off small, got bigger and bigger and more complex into what we are today. It just isn't true, and that's the point of the book. But if you start studying giant men, one of the explanations is they're fathered by these fallen angels. Well, now we're into a spiritual world. Now we're into the biblical story. And we're into the most ancient stories of all, and that's all these stories about Adam and Eve, the fallen angels, sin, you name it, the gods and goddesses, war in heaven, and so on. And you can't avoid it. Well, the evolutionist just has to stay away, or like Adrian Mayer, one of the authors that I mentioned in my book, she's went to the Middle East over there and said, oh, they're all just mastodons. Here's mastodons are buried all over the place over there where these so-called giants came from. Well, she's correct. But as I showed in my book, here's the elephant she's talking about. They got tusks that are 17 feet long, stick out in front of their face. Now, is that really, are you really going to mistake that for a man? Or here's another one over there. He's got no tusks coming out of his head. He's got two tusks comes out of his lower jaw. They point down to his chest. And he's got a nose, a really long nose. You know, is that really something you'd mistake for a man? That's what she's saying. And even she admits that in some of these old temples over there, they had elephant tusks. They knew what elephants were. Either they had them living there, or they knew about them. They had their tusks. In fact, I think the goddess Diana, that huge sculpture of Diana, was made out of mammoth ivory, or elephant ivory, extremely expensive. So they knew about elephants. So that was her bone to the evolution to say, look, giants. There were no real giants so the Bible's untrue. Well, she's just mistaken. So what I try to do is say, yeah, some of these things were mastodons, and you have to be careful. But being involved in paleontology and having studied, I've worked on a lot of mammoth skulls. In fact, I'm restoring one right now. I can tell you that a skull that's 3 feet long and has a cranium 2 feet across, if that were a man's skull, that man would be 20 feet tall. And his head would hold about 15 or 20 gallons of wheat, okay, or corn. Well, they found skulls over there in the Middle East, 1,500 years ago, and they poured 15 or 20 or 30 gallons of corn into it. It wasn't a mastodon or a mammoth skull, because I can guarantee you that a skull of a mammoth or a mastodon that's 3 by 2 feet long and 1.5 feet deep has a brain capacity of less than a gallon.
Wow.
Okay? So she hasn't made her case. She also, well, there's other stuff she gets into, but so what I've tried to do is, if you start looking at the giants and trying to understand where they came from, you're going to find out that there are all these explanations, and one of the things that keeps coming up is aliens and gods and goddesses, UFOs, all these crafts. There's some relation, demons. And what I've shown in the book is, yeah, there's good connections for all this stuff.
Well, let me ask you. I would like to get your opinions on UFOs.
Okay.
When I say that, I'm talking about the craft that people are seeing. There is absolutely no denying that people are seeing these crafts.
Right.
You know, there's just too much evidence. What do you think these things are, and why are they here?
Like you say, after 1 million sightings and reports, with if you read the astronauts' confessions, guys that are about to die, and they tell, here's what I know, I wasn't supposed to say this. You know, all these supposed hidden documents all this time. There's more and more stuff coming to light all the time that, in fact, there are these saucer-looking planes or objects that fly through the air. They do things that airplanes can't do. There seems to be anti-gravitational ability and so on. And there's so much of it, so many reports. To say that it's all hogwash, you're just not dealing in reality.
Yes, it's ridiculous.
So what are they? What in fact are they? Are they metal? Are they something else? Apparently, I'm not going to nail this down, but apparently they are some form of metal or forms of metal. And you're thinking, well, where do they come from? Is it the Germans or is it our own military? Do we have craft like that? Well, we got some stuff that nobody knows about. The Germans had a flying saucer, and it'd get off the ground, but it wouldn't go very far, but they were getting there.
Yep.
So, yeah, we could have flying saucers. Maybe some of them are. But to do the things they do And then you got all the UFO abductions. It used to be 30 years ago, there were some reports made. Some guys did some statistics. They said that most UFO contactees were involved some way in the occult. And I said, okay, that makes sense. But one of my aunts, who was not into the occult, she was as straight-laced as you can possibly be, with a straight-laced husband who was a German farmer who didn't believe any of that stuff. You know, they saw some. And when my aunt told me her sighting, straight face, I said, okay, you know, maybe it's not just a bunch of occult people up there seeing stuff. And I began to consider, well, what the heck would it be? So, to me, you start looking for an answer to something. You start looking in the obvious places, right?
Mm-hmm.
And the obvious place is, well, are these UFOs? Would they be connected to fallen angels? Most people say, well, they're aliens. Well, yeah, an angel is an alien because he comes from somewhere else. He's not like born on the earth here like we are.
Right.
So technically speaking, but that's not what they mean. They mean something else. They mean, you know, these super beings that come from the planet who knows what, that have technology beyond ourselves, and of course it denies God. Well, okay, anytime anybody starts denying God, whatever their conclusion is, you're going the wrong direction. You're going to end up believing some demonic doctrine, and that's what all this stuff is. And I know a lot of UFO people are screaming right now, but, you know, I'm sorry.
That's okay. We're here to openly talk about this stuff.
I listen to their side, and if they'll listen to my side, I'll listen to their side too. So you know, I don't really care. But
yeah, no.
I'm willing to be convinced that there's something else. But I think a lot of this stuff, you can trace it to these fallen angels. And I know a lot of Christians are now screaming up bloody murder. But when the angels fell from heaven, there were a lot of them. A third of heaven fell. That we don't know how many it is. That's a lot of beings. Well, they all had extra powers. They're higher than people, because when Jesus came to earth, he lowered himself a little lower than the angels. That was his humility. Okay, so the angels are above us in some respect. And they apparently can fly through the air, go through the air. Do they have wings? I don't know. They're depicted with wings in ancient art. So, you know, they're beings not like us. They can manifest themselves. When they do, they look like people. And I'm not going to say they can look like women, but there are people who say they can look like women, beautiful women. You know, maybe so. I'm not saying they don't. But they do look like men, can look like men. So, to me, that's a pretty good explanation, a good place to start. Now, do they come from the moon? I just read a bunch of stuff the other day. It's like, you know, even my mind was beginning to wither a little bit. This guy's saying there's on the other side of the moon is hollow. And I go, no, I can't go with the hollow moon business. But what's on the other side of the moon, I don't know.
Exactly.
I do know that a lot of NASA scientists and a lot of the astronauts have said there was something up there. We were being watched. We were being followed. We encountered several other craft. There were things up there. There were apparently walls, you know, that built really like, I don't know, stone or something. So I don't know. I've never been up there. All I can say is, you know, keep an open mind. Consider it. What are they talking about?
Yep. Well, you know, Joe, you fall into this kind of microcosm. You know, when after starting the show in January, I've kind of found that people fall into a few different categories when it comes to UFOs and aliens. You fall into this group that are both religious, but also are open-minded to the whole UFO and ET subject. Mm-hmm. Because, like you say, you know, you're run-of-the-mill Christian. If you started talking about UFOs, they would, you know, freak out a little bit. Do you think that as more and more evidence is found, you know, to support these UFOs and possibly ETs of some sort, and if it were to be proven true, Do you think that it would have a diverse effect on religion? Because there's an argument that's been around for a long time that says, you know, the governments of the world do not want to expose that UFOs and ETs are real because it would cause all this commotion within the religious world and all that. Do you think that would actually happen, or do you think the religious people would welcome it, I guess you could say?
Well, if it were true, I mean, if it were proven to be true, yeah, it'd wreck a lot of religions. I don't think it's true. I don't think it can be proven true, but I do believe that it may appear to be proven to be true, and there be enough evidence, if you will, or support that, hey, this is not like the Bible says. There's something else out there. And I think that would cause a lot of Christians, or so-called Christians, to doubt their faith and doubt the Bible. It's not going to affect me. And I mean, I've been in this. My dad ran for Congress back in 1962 in George Bush's district. In fact, George Sr. was one of his running mates. So I've got every book on conspiracy you can imagine. I've had it since 1962. I've got friends that are giving me files on UFOs, the big-nosed grays, et cetera. There's still more to hear, but I have heard a lot. And I'm not deterred from my biblical view. And I would just encourage people, read the Bible, study the Bible. That's where the truth is. All this other stuff may be something there, yes. You can't deny it. But does it fit the Bible? Does the Bible talk about it? If the Bible is totally ignorant of something, you have to wonder if the Bible is really true. Mm-hmm. But so far I haven't found anything that the Bible doesn't cover, and certainly dinosaurs.
Well, I think
not the Bible.
I think the Bible is a separate thing. I think that God could exist, the Bible could be true, and we could have extraterrestrials from some other planet who have may been created by God as well. Where I get stuck on this, Joe, is that if God is true, the Bible is true, then humans only exist on Earth, or intelligent beings only reside on Earth. Could they not reside on some other planet or some other dimension, but still be connected back to God?
Well, if you take the position that these beings are real and that they are the fallen angels, in fact, then that would, they exist in another place and they're like humans. But that's not really your question, or the other people that take the other position is that there's something other than we know anything about. The universe is a big place and it gets bigger all the time.
Yep.
All I can say is the Bible talks about other worlds, and maybe a world is just another planet or something. But I'm not going to say God doesn't have anybody else out there, because He hasn't told me. I don't see in the Bible where it says there's absolutely nothing else out there. I haven't seen that. But the one thing that people need to keep in mind, Jesus is the Lord of glory. He came from heaven on high. He came down from the throne of God and lowered Himself to come to earth to save mankind from their sins. If, in fact, Jesus is God, and He did come to earth, then earth is important, and people on earth are important. It's super important. Now, did He die for some other beings on some other planet? I don't know. It doesn't say He did, but I know that earth is important, and I know a lot of people are, they're trying to make something else out there that kind of gets away from God and the importance of the sacrifice of Jesus Christ, and, you can't do it. That's a mistake. I just think that's a mistake. They're going to end up, they'll just find out they're mistaken someday.
So what you're saying is you should not separate the two.
No.
Even if you believe in this other thing, don't separate it.
There's nothing, like I say, there's nothing the Bible doesn't consider or can't allow for if one studies it. It's like a lot of things. You say you can teach calculus. You like calculus, but can you teach it? Well, you had to have studied it. Well, we'll study it. You can't teach it without studying it.
Right.
So a lot of people are just lazy. They don't really want to study the Bible. It takes time, and they have to think about it. And it's hard, and strange stuff in there and all that. But if they would, then there's a lot of things that clear up. How to live and all this stuff clears up a lot.
Well, we could sure use some of that in this world, I'll tell you that. How to live with other people. Hey, listen,
Yep.
Joe, we're getting down to the end here, just about out of time, but I wanted to mention a couple of things before we have to call it quits tonight. Number one, the Mount Blanco Fossil Museum. Folks, you got to check out this website. I mean, I know I always talk about other people's website, but this is one website you really need to check out because it's got some really great pictures and information. And that can be found, Joe, at mountblanco.com, right?
That's right.
MTBlanco.com. And then Joe's new book, Giants Against Evolution. And where can that be obtained, Joe?
You can get that from the website, or you can call 806-675-7777.
Okay. And just order it right from there, huh? Right off the phone.
Yes, sir. That's right.
All right. And then if people are ever near Crosbyton, Texas, during the weekdays, stop by and see the place in person. I'd sure like to do that. If I'm ever near there, I'm going to stop by. All right. Well, Joe, listen, it's been a great conversation. I just really enjoyed having you on the show. And, maybe you can come back again and we'll take off where we left and talk some more.
Yeah, I'd be glad to.
All right, Joe. Well, listen, thanks again. Good luck on the book. Keep the museum going, and we'll stay in touch.
Okay.
All right.
All right, man.
Have a good night, Joe. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Open the door, you'll find the secret. To find the answer is to keep